Hello, this is Kalde, and this is day 7 of the IAE 2952, which means, of course, we're going to be looking at Crusader Industries. And I've also been told there's something on tracks here which I don't like. I believe it's Tumbrel. As always, let's just take a look at the display for where everything is, give my quick thoughts on it, and then we'll look at things in more detail to see what is worth having and what isn't worth having. Well, fair warning, half of this is Grand Vehicle, so you know my opinion on there already. This NPC is a little bit away, let's go and stand on this side. Lower level hollow speed, whole bunch of Tumbrel stuff, so yeah, don't buy any of it, like just buy that stuff in game, it's not worth buying for real money. Now we've had that all sorted out, let's go look at the Crusader hologram series. So we have the Genesis Starliner. I mean, it is still a unique ship. I'm not sure actually what the current price of that thing is, but I don't think it has gone up anything yet. If it hasn't, by all means, let's see, no, back, there we go, still at 400. I mean, if you want a ship that moves a lot of people around the place, like that's the sort of gameplay that you want, or you're going to think that's useful for your organization, buy it. Because I have got a feeling that by the time this thing releases, it is going to be significantly more expensive than it is now. By estimation, pure pull out of the air, 650. By the time flight ready. So we'll see how that holds up. But yeah, 400. Could buy. I think a passenger ship is going to be more valuable to have than just a pure cargo ship. And I honestly think it's going to be one of the coolest ships in game at some point, because it's like it's a space jumbo jet. Like, it's going to be cool. There's just no other way around it. Crusader Spirit series. I had thought about making the video initially when it was released, but life got in the way. I am an immense fan of the Spirit series, and I also think that they're not great value. So that's a nice, lovely contradiction. I'll go into it in more detail. When you look at pure value-wise, I honestly recommend, when it comes especially to the base model, for the cargo version, get yourself a Freelancer. It's much better, has more cargo capacity, doubles up on components. It is a much, much better ship. And on top of that, it's cheaper. Or I think same price, one of the two. The bomber version, there's not really much to compare to it, so you can just take it for what it is. Don't really worry too much about it. Just go ahead and get it if your organization needs bombers. Then it comes to the E1. I think, honestly, I have one, but I think it's going to be one of the more useless ships in game. Because it is going to be a relatively short-ranged ship. It doesn't really offer all that much, like with just 6, what are supposed to be like business class seats in there, but honestly, a modern airline business class seat looks better than what I'm seeing on the concept drawings of the E1. So I'm not really a fan of that one. So of the Spirit series, only the bomber is one, because simply there's nothing really to compare it against. And the Tumbrel Ranger, another Grand Vehicle, so yeah, don't buy it. Crusader Starrunner, the Mercury Starrunner. It is a hard one. I think, honestly speaking, when you look at what some other ships offer in the same price range, and considering we don't have the data running gameplay in yet, and beyond that the cargo capacity isn't that great, I cannot really recommend it to buy as a current ship to have around. And because it's flight ready, the price is set. So my recommendation for the MSR, as much as I like it in quite a few ways, it doesn't really do anything good right now in the first. Like, its firepower is woefully limited. Cargo capacity isn't great. It isn't that insanely maneuverable anymore as it was before. So it's not a ship I would recommend that you would buy right now in the first. It doesn't offer enough, and by the time the data running gameplay comes out, you can take another look at it and decide by then whether you want something like a MSR or a Herald. The Ares Starfighter series, both the Ion and the Inferno right now, is just, they're really expensive and they're only good for one thing, and that's shooting at anything like a Hammerhead or larger. And at that point, like, really not worth it right now. There's not enough content for these ships to shine. The Ion was a easy recommendation earlier on, because it was just literally one-shotting all the NPC ships and also players, which is why people got a bit annoyed by it. They nerfed it, and by now it's inaccurate, it's frustrating to fly, it's frustrating to operate. They're not nice ships to fly around with. So for the current state of the game, neither of those are recommended purchases. The Crusader 2 series, Hercules, of course. The M2, don't like it. I honestly don't. I think it's just a far more expensive C2. And the additional armor is not going to be worth the difference. They show it in like pictures like hot dropping under fire. You don't drop your troops. Like you don't drop, especially like a ship like this, you don't drop it in under fire. You drop that away from the front line. You unload your tanks, for example, your AA vehicles and all of those things. And then you move them to the front line. This is not a drop ship. This is a transport ship. So if you're going to take fire in this thing, that means that your escort has failed. Now granted, if you're going to be flying in a hot area where there's also fighters and stuff around, maybe the additional armor can come in at some value. But you're looking at a far more limited role. Because the C2 can do pretty much everything that the M2 does except for take as many hits. But it can also do more because it has a higher cargo capacity. It doesn't necessarily have to drop seats in there. But then again, if you're moving vehicles around, people can just sit in their vehicle seats as they are assigned to do. And otherwise just stand around or be creative with it. The M2s just doesn't really work in my opinion. Too expensive for what it can do. A2, talk about insanely overpriced. It is insanely overpriced. There's no other way around it. It's definitely not worth the asking price. I think they have gone a little bit insane with the bomber tax. And you can see that with the Spirit series. The Spirit bomber is a lot more reasonable price-wise than the A2 is. So I cannot recommend the A2 just purely on a price basis. And right now the only thing that it's good for is bombing jump down, and well, it's just not really enough about it. So if you really need a bomber at some point, I'm sure you can acquire it when the gameplay comes for it. But even then, it's probably going to be one of those ships that's going to be easier to acquire in-game, relatively speaking. And then of course we have the Tunnel Nova tanks, and well, okay, it is capable. It does its thing in-game. I just absolutely fervently hate everything about it design-wise because it is absolutely stupid. But capability-wise, it packs a really big gun, it does a heck of a lot of damage. The downside is it's still a ground vehicle, it is still very vulnerable, and it's also quite pricey. So for those reasons, I actually would not recommend you buy them. So with a quick overview done, let's just go ahead and look at the things in a little bit more detail. I'll start downstairs and then we end up upstairs. So should be a relatively quick one. There's not that many variations of different ships going around today. Yeah, you have the Tomrol, I think, was this a Cyclone, or yeah, Cyclone series. It's open as well, like that's another issue I have with these things. You're completely exposed inside of there. So anybody shooting at you with like a ballistic cannon like some of these things have, and just does a drive-by, I don't need to kill this machine, I just kill you inside of it because you're completely unprotected. It's stupid. That's all it is. And in the end, like, if you want them, buy them in-game. Ground vehicles are cheap enough in-game. Buy them in-game, please. Genesis Starliner, the jumbo jet of space. It is currently, of course, still a really old concept, this thing. I expect it to change substantially when it finally goes into full production. That said, it is gonna be a really cool ship to have around. There's definitely gonna be a market for this kind of role. And you can also look at it like from a large organization perspective. Sometimes you may just need to move a lot of people around the place. And having one of these ships in your organization could be very useful. Beyond that is that you're really looking at servicing the NPC market in a ship like this. And I think the nice thing is that it can actually do that in a lot of places without needing any additional support. Because if you're flying in safe space, then you should probably be fine. So having one of these ships, you can actually run that with a small group of people. Because you're probably going to need like your pilot, co-pilot, engineer, and also some people that are just handling surface stuff. Now you can maybe hire some NPCs for those kind of roles as well. We'll have to wait and see. But even from a small number of players, like if this is really what you want to do, you want to fly your big jumbo in game, then you can definitely make this work. Alternatively, like maybe a full-on player run, like full-on airliner style game could also work. But that case, of course, you're looking at requiring quite a number of vessels like this and smaller variations thereof that we're probably going to see at some point. So you're looking at a relatively hefty investment because you need a lot of ships. Because you need a lot of ships in a lot of different places all the damn time. In the end, of course, the fact is that there is no gameplay for this thing yet. We don't know how it's going to work out. However, when you look at the price and consider it's still a concept, if this is really something that you're looking for, like, hey, this is me interested, I would still say, like, by all means, go ahead and acquire it. So that's the Genesis Starliner. And the Spirit series, as I said, I hate it and I love it. I absolutely love the design of the Spirit. Like, it is a very classic science fiction style design. And for me, this one always works. It's just a flying plane in space, but with sharper edges to it and things cut out in bits. And I love it. Simple as that. That's the reason I have these ships. I don't really have a use for them in my sort of operation, but I love them. That's the reason I have. I like the design, and that's it. Only reason. Purely looking at capabilities. So when you look at the C1, the C1 has less cargo capacity and less componentry than a freelancer. Just a base series freelancer. And I believe they come in same price, roughly speaking. It has equal or even slightly less capacity than a Cutlass series, and like even the Cutlass has at least one more component doubled up than the Spirit has, and the Cutlass is cheaper. Speaking of the Cutlass Black here. CIG stated during the Q&A, yeah, but it's fine because Crusader ships are more maneuverable. So they will have less need for this additional componentry. I will agree that Crusader ships are more maneuverable. The Hercules is well known to be incredibly agile for the ship of size that it has. So I do expect that the Spirit series here will be a very responsive ship to fly. And that is definitely going to be an advantage. But I don't think that's enough of an advantage to make up that you have less cargo space and just less of those componentries. Especially when it comes to things like shields. Like, having more shields is never a bad thing. They're always going to be useful. But also other things like power plants and having those doubled up. It doesn't just mean I've got double the power, but it also means a level of redundancy. You don't lose your entire ship if a lucky shot takes out your power plant, which is a risk that you're going to be running when you only have one of these things. And then I'm thinking, like, if I'm going to be flying the C1 with my cargo, do I want to take that risk? Because I'm probably kind of running somewhat more higher value cargo because I've got less capacity. So I need to make the most out of it. Do I want to take additional risk by having less shields and less redundancy? If I fly the A2, I am literally flying a ship that is designed to go into an area where it is going to be shot at. If you're going to be dropping things on people that go boom, they're going to take offense to this fact. They will be trying to return fire to you. If it's not to kill you, then at least to make sure that you get the hell out of there. And if you're flying a Spirit, which was one shield, you're going to be like, I'm out of here, because if I stay, I'm dead. You don't have survivability. You have one power plant. If it gets taken down, you crash and burn. Because you're flying in atmosphere in a gravity well. No power means no power, which means no engines. Off you go. You are incredibly vulnerable. You're flying the E1, it is designed like a VIP transport. I think my VIPs would like the idea that my ship has a certain degree of redundancy in it. That it has a good level of protection to it. It doesn't offer those things. So it is an amazing looking design. It's probably going to be flying great. But the capabilities that the ship offers for the price point that it's at, and keep in mind this is a concept price point. The price will go up when it gets closer to flight ready, and especially when it is flight ready. The capability is not there. This ship definitely needs a look at, and they need to look at doubling up some of those components at the very least to make it worth buying. And for that reason, my recommendation on the Crusader Spirit series is honestly put, don't buy them. The only one that you could potentially look at is the A2, even though it is vulnerable. It is the only other bomber in the game that we have compared to the A1. Sorry, not this is the A1. It's the only other bomber we have compared to the A2. I expect there's going to be more bombers out there. It would not surprise me if we see a Retaliator with a bomber module at some point as well. So, looking all those things in, it's a really hard ship, and I cannot recommend it purely on a capability level because it isn't there as much as I absolutely adore the design. And that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at our value and at our capabilities. Also, if you're gonna get, like, of course, if you're gonna buy it anyway, fleet size wise, these are ships that are great for smaller level players. Like if you just play with alone, maybe with a couple of friends, this ship will do its job fairly well. And then depending on the role, like they can go up into higher level organizations. Like the E1, depending on the actual range that it has, it may just be useful to move a couple of people around from place to place. It would be nice if you could maybe get a higher density configuration of a Spirit as well when it comes to moving people around. Time will tell, of course. And then we have the Tumbrel, what are these things called again? Oh yeah, the Rangers. Ground vehicles. I will say, of all the bikes that are out there, I like these ones the most. I just like the fact that they're wheeled vehicles instead of all the hover stuff. But again, you know, it is a ground vehicle, so once it comes out, just buy it in game. It's not worth spending the actual currency on it. And then with these, were these the new things? I already forgot. Cyclone. Those are the same as there. Anyway, same issues, it's completely open. Way too exposed, yada yada yada. Don't buy them, really. If you're gonna buy them, just buy them in game. That way you don't lose anything. And you get blown up inevitably. Or you get killed inside of one. Not gonna go inside, like the Crusader Hercules series has been well known by now. And we said, like, the M2, I don't believe that the additional firepower that it has with an extra turret, any armor, is gonna be worth the loss in cargo capacity that it has. That's pure SCU capacity. Like, that's one of the things that we just don't know yet. It's like the cargo bay interior is still the same size. So, if you fly through lower gravity planets, you can probably still get away with just loading as much stuff on there as with the C2. It's just that the game technically will not allow it, and maybe it doesn't have the securing pads for it. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, honestly, the additional price that this thing commands over a standard C2, it's not going to be worth it. If you need to be dropping your tanks off, just get a C2. Look at the modern day military. Their cargo planes are cargo planes. They don't pack them full of armor plates, because that reduces the fact that its main job is to get stuff to a location. And if you need to do more flights, guess what? It's also more risk, because every single flight you take is an additional risk that you take. And by the end of, like, if you're flying in with an M2 or a C2 and somebody's like, hey, I want to shoot you down, it's probably not going to make a difference whether you fly an M2 or C2. Like, the additional survivability is not going to change the outcome of it. It's just going to delay it ever so slightly. But if they do it well and they ambush you when you're low and close to the ground, there's no way you're going to go. You're going to be dead either way. So, yeah. Just buy the C2, and the C2 is one of those ships that I can recommend. It is relatively pricey. That's definitely a fact. But it is a really nice ship. It flies amazingly, it is very maneuverable. It is a ship, of course, that's designed to be a roll-on, roll-off style ship. It can unload, hence its cargo, probably just about anywhere. It can be used to supply smaller outposts, maybe also ships like Pioneers and stuff like that. It's a very flexible ship. It's not going to be the ship for the bulk trades, like the bulk trades between stations in space, like in systems. That's just the space for the MISC hull series. That's their job. But this is a style of ship that gets you stuff to a ground side location, and it can move a couple of systems over without any issue to do that. So it offers you a great degree of flexibility, whether that is like you're just bringing cargo to supply stuff, or whether you're transporting vehicles. This thing will do it very well for you. Because it's one of the ships that, despite its reasonably high price tag, it is one I can definitely recommend. And in game you can make quite a lot of money with it, because it is, I believe, still the largest cargo ship that we have available. Keep in mind, survivability wise, it is worse off than something like, for example, a Carrack will be. The A2, well, as we mentioned in the beginning, it is just way too expensive for what it does. Yes, it's really cool, it drops really big booms. But then again, there's not really any gameplay for it that requires the really big booms. So it's just not worth having, really. Maybe at some point, when we really need a heavy style bomber, this ship will come into its own again. By then, however, I think it's probably going to be better off just acquiring them in game than to spend the money over it. Like, you're looking at nearly doubling of a price over a C2. And I think that's just too steep of a price for this ship. I think that CIG went too high with this level of ship, because it's the same price as a Hammerhead or Perseus or stuff like that. And I don't think this ship falls in that same category. And then finally, the Nova tank. It is too expensive for what it really does. As I said, I don't like the design, but just purely looking at the cost and capabilities, it is very capable for what it does, but it is still lacking the new rework. It doesn't have proper armor yet. And it's being a ground vehicle, it is just very vulnerable. And it's also very vulnerable because it is so stupidly large. And the reason it is so stupidly large is because it is a really stupid design. So I cannot recommend you to buy the Tumbril Nova. So that would be the end then for the buyer's guide section of this. So if that's where you came here for, by all means, now is your time to tune out. I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and we will see each other again tomorrow. For the rest, I am going to go on a little bit on the Tumbril Nova as to why it is such a poor design. Because I do believe that it's just something that is worth repeating nowadays. What we have, of course, it is a tank, so the idea is big gun on a mobile chassis. But you can see just how absolutely ginormous this thing is. Look at this. I'm standing here at the front and my character is just a little bit taller than it. Its footprint is insanely large. And there's no reason for that. Because the larger your footprint is, A, you become more vulnerable because you're a larger target. And more importantly, when it comes to B, is also you become less effective because you need to armor more space, so you need to have more additional weight, which means you need more power, you need more of everything. There's a reason why tank designers traditionally have tried to keep the things as absolutely tiny as they can get away with. And whenever they could and technology allowed them, they are reducing the height of those tanks. The reason a Sherman tank in World War II was so tall was because it was designed for a radial engine, which is really tall. That's the reason the tank is so tall. If you look at your current crop of modern day MBTs, they're a lot lower. Your driver is almost laying down in front of it, because there's not enough height to have them sit up, but they don't need to be. And then you have this thing. And look at this, entire interior in which I can walk around. I can have everybody sleep inside of here in comfort. Which I'm sure like traditional tankers would appreciate. They can sleep inside because hey, nice and warm and dry. But considering all the downsides that it comes with it, it is not worth it. A proper tank like you literally would be dropping down in here and you could maybe just squeeze through and get from one position to the other. Instead we have this giant interior height over here that is just insane. Big freaking fighter style seats. And of course this entire full on seat for the turret control over here. And like, I like the idea still that it's a 3-man tank. Because like purely from a psychological perspective, you want to have at least 3 people in a tank. So for a gameplay perspective, 2 would have been more than enough. Like, look at most modern day shooters, you have like, the guy who drives the tank also controls the gun, and whoever gets in there just controls like the small turret on top, and that's it. Gameplay wise, I would have just designed it as a driver and then have a gunner on there. Here of course we have now a gunner, driver, co-driver, or maybe they operate the other smaller turret, I don't even know. Either way, having 3 people in here, lore-wise, makes a lot of sense. But this interior space is incredibly wasteful, and it makes the tank very, very large when it shouldn't have to be. This thing has the same footprint as 4 standard current range MBTs, and it has the same volume as 8 of them, or even, I think it was 8 that I calculated back then. If you think about it, you can have 1 of these, or you can have 8 Abrams tanks, 8 Challenger tanks, 8 Leopards, 8 T-14 Armadas, 8 Black Panthers, you name it. You can have any modern main battle tank and you can have 8 of them. Just because of how large it is. Would I say that that's going to be the size now? Because they have really a whopping big gun on these things. So you're going to need some mass for that thing to be there. But it definitely could be smaller if that interior space was just done like, hey, I'm getting in a hatch and sitting down. Like we see in a lot of fighters in the game. Like a lot of small ships in the game, I drop into a cockpit. Why don't I have three of such seats on this thing? I could have gone away with the interior. We could have squished it to be more narrow, shorter, and of course flatter. And it would have been a much, much better design. And of course the final issue is that this thing has a absolutely gargantuan shot trap. As you can see, it is glacis. So that's the front plate that's angled like this. It goes straight up under into the turret. So anything that was ballistic, and if they model it properly and it wouldn't go through, it could just like bounce up and go straight into the turret. Nothing you can do about it. So it is very, very vulnerable in that regard, even once the armor comes in. So that's the reason why I just don't like the Tumbril Nova. It is a really poor design for a tank. And that's why originally I think I put it away now because people just get annoyed by it. But I made a video, by the way. I said it's a classic example of a horrible science fiction tank design. Where people design something and completely forget the core fundamentals behind designing something like this. And I understand that it is a game and things are supposed to be fun. But what does that interior add to you? It really doesn't give you anything. While there's from a gameplay perspective, a smaller tank with the same level of firepower would have been a definitive advantage. Not just for the tank itself, but also for the entire logistical chain that needs to support it. If I could make these things more narrow, smaller, I could carry more of them on any ship. So there's just a lot of reasons to say that design-wise this thing is just useless. Quite frankly, it is really, really useless. It is just a stupid design. Is it going to change now? They'll stay around with it. It's going to stick around, so Celefi, we have to deal with it. But I just wanted to explain as to why I don't like the design of this thing and why I have so much dislike of this thing, and actually it's also a factor like I actually just hate this damn thing because it is such an affront to something like that. Will it do its job in game? Time will tell. We just don't know. And yeah, that has been me for Crusader and Tumbril. We'll see each other again tomorrow, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.